Billy Bob's Space Trucker. Chapter 35, Part 1. Cress fluttered his eyes open as he heard the buzzer humming through the barracks. Slowly he rose up out of his sleeping pond as the others around him did the same. The crustaceans dripped off for a moment and turned, walking forward through the barracks. Soon they were out in the cafeteria, each getting into line with a tray. Many of them were twitching their mandibles as they tried to wake up. It never seemed like they got enough sleep anymore. It had been rather busy since the war had begun. For some reason, the normal Greslin security wasn't considered enough for the capital, so several units of veteran hunter-killers had been brought in to act as both ceremonial and actual guards. This was fine in theory, but many of the new members didn't like being guards. Normally, the guard positions were bred specifically for the task from the Grand Matriarch's stock, but the influx meant there would be some lag time before her newly laid eggs hatched, and longer still before they were full-sized and ready to work. So a number of career killers were stuck working security, guarding the cowards who made up the officials of the other species. No one had attacked the capital since the Regulation War, and assassinations were very uncommon. But they were scared, and he was a soldier, so here he was. He clicked out in annoyance as he had every day since getting this post when they filled his tray with food. Grains, fish, some grayish-brown substance they liberally called sauce. They were still changing over the cafeteria from Greslin specs, so the crustacean replacements had to make do with field rations for now. So he moved over to a table, setting the tray down as he settled in a sitting position with his legs partially tucked under his body. Picking up the pieces, he ate with the same quick motions he had back in training as a juvenile. When he was finished, he and the rest of his table rose as one, moving to deposit their trays for cleaning. Then they moved out into the hygiene room. Krez was next to Vec this morning, so they took turns inspecting each other's back shell for any defects or discoloration in the hydrating mucus. Once done, they turned towards a mirror, each picking up a brush and pick to clean their mouths of food they hadn't consumed. Once they were finished with that, they moved out to their prep room. They opened their lockers as each pulled on a combat harness. They were supposed to have those fancy ones like the rest of the ceremonial guard, but instead they just had standard black mesh. Shield emitter, stunner, short-range hand beamer, some energy packs, a set of energy restraints, and of course their targeting computers. They checked each piece as they tucked it into their black mesh harnesses, and then when they were finished, they closed their lockers and walked through the blank beige halls that made up the service corridors of the capital. Soon they reached a junction, various teams splitting up to go to their assigned sectors. Krez and 5 others moved along their path, soon ascending a set of stairs to reach the small security office overseeing one of the building entrances. The dignitaries had all gone through on this shift, so this was the actual ceremonial guard. Their shiny silver-white harnesses, top-of-the-line equipment, perfectly conditioned shells. Krez hated them. They always acted so superior. And he knew many of them boasted about getting to court one of the younger matriarchs for the possibility of breeding rights. So unfair. Krez knew that unless all other viable males suddenly died, he'd never be allowed to breed. "We did all the hard stuff for you already. Just try not to burn the building down while we're gone," one of the other guards said as the others chittered in amusement. Krez and his brothers clicked in annoyance but quickly replaced the guards. Krez checked the weapons locker and noted all the heavier energy weapons were still in place. He stepped out of the office into the main station near the weapons scanner. The other 5 stayed in the office, but he liked being out in the corridor better. They'd left one of the vid screens open to the summit going on not far from his position. He watched as one of the Greslin superintendents stood before the assembled officials. "Which is why we need a unified effort against these humans. They openly defy all conventional methods of warfare. If we don't present them a single force, they'll take us apart piece by piece. The Kityans are already showing their cowardly nature by surrendering several systems without a fight." The Kityan ambassador gulped and stood up. "The greatest fleet you've ever assembled was destroyed in a single action against them. What hope do we have?" Then he sat back down. There was a murmur spreading throughout the officials. Of course, the Greslin's stance didn't change since he was in an exosuit, but Krez figured he wasn't too happy about that comment. "It was a cowardly surprise attack. Nothing more. They refuse to face us in a true battle because they know our dreadnoughts will annihilate their so-called super carriers. But we have numbers on our sides. They can't be everywhere at once." "But they have nuclear weapons," another worried diplomat gasped out. There was a rumble from Matriarch Nicole, who was taking the place of the Grand Matriarch tonight. Apparently, the Grand Matriarch was ill, which was unusual. Might I remind you all that we have faced this threat firsthand, and this is why we know we must defeat them now. The vid screen switched over to images of the destroyed colony. Cress chittered nervously as he looked at them. It was unnerving to see the shadows that were etched into the stone, the twisted and melted structures. He knew they were choosing the absolute worst pictures to highlight how terrible it was. But he was confident that there wasn't any good pictures from a city that had been hit by nuclear weapons. These Americans have not only used these weapons against us, but they've used them against the race from which they descend. The UHG has confirmed that Americans have used these weapons before. This subspecies is incredibly dangerous. They must be dealt with now. There were rumors that even the founders couldn't push the other species to agree to war against all of humanity, so they had to settle for the American subspecies. Still, everything he'd seen made it seem like the UHG would be far more reasonable. Not only must we deal with the Americans, but the Libertonians who clearly provoked this war and likely influenced the Americans secretly beforehand. When this war is over, they shall not be allowed any autonomy. That drew more murmurs and surprise from the diplomats around the chamber. There was a click on his comm. Loading Bay 22 here. The Gerweldians have brought a statue. We're checking it in. Careful, Loading Bay 22. They might have hidden snacks inside. He heard someone reply, and there were clicks of mirth across the comm. Krez looked back at the screen. He wished he was out fighting the humans. He knew they had destroyed their colony in response to the raids, but he would be glad to serve his species gloriously in battle. He heard it was bad on Bastion. He should be out there with his brothers, not stuck here being bored and eating bad rations. Maybe he could get a forward posting by the end of the war, see if he could earn some glory accolades. It was a long shot, but maybe he could get courtship rights with a new breed matriarch. With any luck, his people would come out of this war stronger than ever. They'd used the first war with the Libertonians to advance their power considerably. This shouldn't be any different. He'd been watching the screen but not paying attention, so he had to concentrate to figure out what was going on now. One of those strange reptiles who licked their own eyeballs was talking. What was their name again? Busamites or something like that? But the founders have not allowed any new member species even half of their own power. Clearly this war is an indicator that the founders must distribute power more evenly. Krez chittered a little as he heard the murmurs in the crowd. He was never fond of diplomats, but it irked him to see the other species use this war as a platform to gain power. It didn't occur to him that he was hoping his own species could do just that. The war must first be won, which is why we're undergoing massive restructuring to better assist the combat that rages today, said one of the Phyllis. They'd been fairly useless in this war, their style of combat horribly easy for the Americans to defeat. So he knew they were looking for any way to start getting their honor back. Hey, one of the security observers outside just went offline, he heard one of his brothers say from the security room. Just turn off the feed and turn it back on, he called out. What did they expect? An attack on the Capitol building? Outrageous. It would take a massive fleet just to get this close. He looked back at the screen. Furthermore, even if we do develop FTL technology to allow us to get into American-controlled space, how do you propose we attack their colonies? Have you seen the planets they inhabit? None of our species could survive on any one of those for more than a few minutes. And that's if they had appropriate survival gear. Of course, a Kityan was trying to defend their constant surrendering. The cowards just didn't want to fight. There was a chime, and he turned to see a Gerweldian with a large Vekish bodyguard that had some sort of bag. He waved them through the scanner with a claw and looked back at the vid screen. The matriarch was talking. Let us not forget. He heard the approval chime of the machine as the Gerweldian passed through. There are humans that have shown their evil and terrible nature on a small scale. The terrorists who attacked the museum are still out there. He heard the negative buzzer as the Vekish tried to step through the device. He chittered in annoyance, figuring the idiot hadn't keyed his credentials in properly. Turning, he saw a massive blue fist racing towards his face. There was a solid crunch as his head snapped back, pieces of shell flying away as the matriarch spoke. Even now the terrorist is out there. We must not forget the threat to our way of life that is. Billy Bob Space Trucker. Billy Bob leaped over the counter, walking towards the security door. He kicked it off the hinges with the amplified strength the fake Bork suit gave him. The bag was on the counter, open, and in his hands was item number 1, an AA-6 shotgun. The stunned crabs inside were all staring at him, their mandibles twitching in shock. "Oh shit," one had time to say before he finally pulled the trigger. The specially crafted 6-gauge rounds had been designed with the increased strength of a power suit in mind, and oh, did it show. Billy Bob stood in the doorway as he slowly turned, the buckshot flying out into the room, shredding crab and console alike. The guards flying backwards as they were torn apart by the torrent of fire and metal that was spewing out of the muzzle of that weapon. Billy Bob was very well aware he didn't need to go so far with it, but he stood there, feeling the weapon lightly jerk in his hands as it went through round after a round, pulverizing the room and everything inside it. Finally, the drum was empty, and he stood there, grinning inside the suit as the Bork face mimicked the motion. He could see sunlight sneaking through the holes in the walls of the office, even though they were inside the Capitol building itself. Finally, he detached the drum, letting it fall to the floor and the pile of spent cartridges, turning as he slapped another one into place. Then he hopped back over the counter, zipped up the bag, and slung it over his shoulder before grinning down at the hamster. "You're free to run away now. I think I blew our cover." The hamster nodded and went running back out the way they'd come. He was humming inside his suit as he looked at the map overlay. "Any alarms?" "No. You killed them all before they could react." He heard Amelia's voice in his ear as he smiled. "The other teams are moving on their objectives. You need to clear one more security station and then the loading bay I'm in." "Understood." He wished he could start playing some heavy metal right now. Oh, or Stars and Stripes Forever. Maybe the Beach Boys, just to throw everyone for a loop. Oh well. He'd have to settle for his own sounds. Ooh, Yankee Doodle went to town. A ridding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. He was walking down a hallway as he saw a carb lean out to find out what the noise was. Seeing the armed Bork, it let out a hiss of surprise before Billy Bob fired the shotgun, pulverizing the guard. Their shields utterly useless against the 6-gauge buckshot. As he stood in front of the next security booth, he didn't even bother hopping over the counter. "Yankee Doodle, keep it up." He pulled the trigger again as the crabs started to rush out, only to get cut down, the lightweight Xeno construction splintering apart again as the round slammed into it. "Yankee Doodle, dandy." He could see one inside, frantically trying to open a weapons locker. "Mind the music and the step!" But there was nothing it could do as the buckshot tore through both the crab and the locker he was trying to open. And would the girls be handy? He stood there observing the second obliterated guard post before dropping the second drum and taking one off his harness before slamming it home. He began to hum then, trying to make it sound like cool theme music, or as close as one could get with humming theme music as he walked down the hall a ways. He saw the door for the loading bay and turned, kicking it in as the door went flying, smashing into a crab who'd been standing on the other side. He stepped out and saw these crabs had weapons in hand already, but they sure as hell hadn't been expecting him. "Hey guys, what's up?" They stared at him for a second, and then all began to aim as he pulled the trigger. The metal crate in the center held Amelia, but he knew she couldn't get out until he entered the code. Yet he didn't feel much like sharing these guys. He walked forward, the few rounds the crabs managed to fire getting absorbed by his suit's shield, which, as far as he could tell, was all the best of Xeno shielding and all the best of human high-density metal, which was fine by him. Soon they were splattered across the walls as he dropped the shotgun and opened a hatch on the side of the crate. "Have you out in a jiffy, Amelia?" "Good. The others are reporting total success so far." Then he heard the door to the loading bay open and looked over to see several surprised crabs in one of those armored metal ones. Fuck. He quickly pulled the bag open again and then leaped forward as he pulled out his next weapon. "What's happening, Billy Bob?" "I got it!" He reassured Amelia as he rushed forward, holding in his hands what amounted to an all-metal power suit-ready fire axe. The head had been sharpened to as fine a point as possible with modern technology, and he wasn't sure if that meant a single atom or molecule or whatever, but he knew it was fucking sharp. The crab in his sights had time to widen his eyes in surprise, but that was about it as Billy Bob slashed, cleaving through the guard without even a moment of resistance. Then he spun, extending his arms as he slashed through two more around him who cried and gurgled as their upped bodies had been suddenly opened to the outside world. The armored crab tried to turn, but he jumped over it, slamming down on a screaming crab who fired a single shot up at him before Billy Bob collided with his body, crushing it beneath the heavy suit even as he rolled forward and swung the axe once more to split it straight through the last regular crab's skull and torso. They were too big for it to be any kind of clean cut, but the body collapsed, leaking everywhere while Billy Bob spun again. The armored crab was turning, but he swiped out, leaving the bottom half of its left legs off, and as it toppled over her, brought the axe down through the head to finish it off. He stood there for a few seconds, looking around as he heard Emily. "Wow, that was incredible, and here I doubted your melee weapon." "Axes are sweet," was his only reply as he turned to finish opening the crate the Libertonian power suit was in. Emily was watching from a building bordering the Capitol building grounds, and as Amelia finally had the freedom to sit up in her suit and step out into the daylight, she jumped up, flapping her wings as she quickly flew down to them. "All right. What's the plan now?" Billy Bob said, looking between the 10-foot-tall Libertonian power suit and Emily. "Seriously?" Amelia asked. "Yeah, I kind of forgot with all the awesomeness I've just done. We're killing stuff towards the center now, right?" Emily nodded. "The teams have activated some of the meeting room security features. We've just alerted the guards, but inside they're now sealed in and their lines to the outside world are cut so they have no idea we're coming." "Perfect," Billy Bob said, returning to his bag. He sheathed the axe on his back and pulled out the second-to-last weapon they'd given him. The other two stared at the strange-looking item he pulled out, made of composite materials. "What's that?" He activated it, and the item opened up, revealing an interior handle which he picked up, letting the rest of it nestle around his arm. "The ZF one. It's light. Handle's adjustable for easy carrying. Good for rights and lefties. Breaks down to 4 parts undetectable by X-ray. Ideal for quick, discrete interventions. A word on firepower, titanium recharger. 3,000 clips with bursts of 3 to 300. Plus all the oldies but goldies, rocket launcher, arrow launcher, and flamethrower. My favorite." They stared at him for a moment while he dropped the AA-6 back into the bag and slung it over his shoulder, shift the axe from his back to a side sheath on his harness. It took a very specific sheath to house that blade, and he didn't want to accidentally cut parts of himself off while he fought. "All right, ladies, move out." "Well, I'm not. You're fighting forward. I'm holding them off from out here," Amelia said, turning as the power suit stepped outside, and he blinked. "Then why did we smuggle you in here?" "To get me as close as possible while the others secured the security systems." He thought that over, trying to decide if it was a good plan or not, before shrugging and walking into the Capitol building with Emily behind him. "Stay behind cover until I let you know we're clear." She nodded and kept a ways back from him as he kicked down another door and found himself in a wide corridor. There were statues and paintings and tapestries of various xenos from the founding species, and he was sure that they wanted him to feel awe and respect for all the history around him. Instead, he turned to one of the paintings of a giant crab queen bitch and activated the flamethrower. A jet of fire burst out, torching it as an alarm rang out. He saw crabs with silver shields and much better-looking weapons burst out from around a junction to his left and smiled. "Something tells me we go this way." He began to let out bursts of those titanium bullets which tore through the crabs, shots slamming into his shield as he advanced, seemingly unconcerned. "Ooh, I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day." A rocket zipped out to obliterate a crab on a balcony with a matter slammer. "I've been working on the railroad, just to pass the time away." He saw another group burst out of a door to his right and turned, letting out a non-stop burst of fire as the bullets cut through the 3 of them. "Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn." Another matter slammer on the balcony down the hall, but 3 arrows slammed into that one's chest as it screeched and tumbled over the railing. "Can't you hear the captain shooting?" There was some sort of emplacement around the next corridor junction, but a jet of fire was quick to get the crabs burning, and a burst of bullets cut them down. "Die now, blow your horn!" He looked back at Emily and then down each of the corridors he could see before waving her forward. "Hope you don't mind, but I'm going to skip ahead." "Skip ahead? To where?" No, in the song." He could see movement ahead with some sort of massive ornate metal door behind a series of emplacements, but he just marched forward. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know! A rocket streamed out from his gun, exploding one of the fixed guns he could see on a platform to the left side of the massive door. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know! He aimed to fire another rocket at the other side and heard a beep. Quickly, he triggered another blast of arrows which peppered that platform, hissing out green smoke as the crabs coughed and sputtered, clutching their faces as they either died or passed out, he had no idea. Strumming on the old banjo. Singing fee-fi-fiddly-o. More crabs were behind some heavier shielding, but he let out a steady burst of bullets which made the shields flicker and fail before the crabs behind them were turned into shreds. Fee-fi-fiddly-o-o-o. Fee-fi-fiddly-I-o. He saw another crab who frantically activated some sort of shielding in an alcove to the side. This barrier is immune to ballistics, it quickly shouted at him, raising a matter slammer while he just thumbed the flamethrower once more. And as the crabs screamed out, engulfed in flames, Billy Bob sang. Strumming on the old banjo. The crab slumped down dead, the shield still in place as he smiled back at Emily. I fucking love my job. And so splits a chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker, but does not yet end. Chapter 35, Part 2. Chief Sneaky Busybody Pimford Weslethorpe III was slowly walking through the Grand Matriarch's estate. He had acquired a chef's uniform and was quick to flatten himself against the wall as any of the guards walked by, which he knew any good spy should do. The Crusticans, for their part, would just glance at him as they walked back and then let their claws click to indicate confusion before moving on by. They'd long ago stopped trying to figure out Gerweldians. Once the patrols had walked by him, Pimford would then start walking again, humming the Gerweldians' national anthem to himself softly in an attempt to keep his courage up. Here he was, deep in the estate of the Grand Matriarch, with pockets stuffed full of sleeping drugs, and no one was any the wiser to his clever subterfuge. Of course it helped that Gerweldians had such an awful reputation for espionage and being secretive that the fact he hadn't simply told everyone he was a spy made them figure he was just another weird Gerweldian just doing his job. Emily had given him a few tips on how to better do his job while he was here. Don't talk to people unless they talk to you first. Then she also mentioned don't tell people you're a spy. That was a good one, he'd even written that one down. Finally, when someone asked what he was doing, he should tell them what he was doing, as if he was really who he claimed to be. That one was just genius. But it was taking a little time to get used to the idea, so mostly he'd just stare at people who asked him things until they either left or let him pass. The estate was massive, with sections of it submerged so she could switch between her hunting ground and hunting reef freely. The massive creature also had quite a large number of servants, picked from Gerweldians, he'd like to think, because everyone loved Gerweldians. But it was most likely because she knew she could make them cower in fear whenever she wanted, and they doubled as a snack if she got tired of them. Pimford didn't know that, of course. He was making his way through the estate when he slipped into one of the side rooms to get out of the halls for a bit. Then he blinked as he looked around the large room filled with art and weapons that were apparently trophies of the matriarch's centuries of life and struggle for power. He'd heard many grisly tales about such rooms for matriarchs, but as he looked around, he didn't see any bodies floating in jars, or skeletons or the like, so perhaps the stories were just exaggerated to scare young Gerweldians. But he did see someone else in the room, and he froze for a moment, trying to press himself against the wall and flatten out as if that would stop the maid from seeing him. But once she turned, he gasped. Those full, fat cheeks, that rotund body, that luscious, full coat. She was the most beautiful Gerweldian he'd ever seen. He stood there speechless for several seconds as she looked at him. "Hello." "I'm a chef," he nearly shouted as he tried to control his mind. She was a maid, which meant she couldn't cook right. But that body, she had to be constantly eating to maintain such a wonderful figure. What if she already had a boyfriend who was a chef? Husband? He didn't see the traditional cake necklace to signify her betrothal. "Oh, you are? Why are you in the trophy room?" "Oh, no." She was on to him. "Quick, think of something else." "Because I heard the most beautiful maid worked here." "Ooh, that's good." "Really? Who?" The Gerweldian looked around before she realized she was here alone, and her eyes went wide. "Me?" "Yes. Pimford quickly approached her, taking one hand in his own as he spoke. I've never laid eyes on a more beautiful creature, not even when I saw a majestic burwello eating its body weight in grains. Oh, you're so romantic, she swooned for a moment. But what are you really doing here? You're not allowed in the trophy room. He gulped. I would tell you, but I would have to kill you if I did. I'm on a mission of the utmost importance. She gasped at that. Like a spy. I can't say. He pressed his one forearm to forehead. Alas, I must not reveal to you what must be done, lest you be a target. But why are you telling me this much? Well, if I don't tell you what I'm doing, you don't know. You just know it's important. She blinked and nodded at that. Ooh, that makes sense. So mysterious, she then said as she realized what he was saying. Is it dangerous? Very dangerous. But I can't stress enough that I simply cannot reveal to you why I'm really here. Because if I did, I could not live with myself. Why not? Because then I'd have to kill you to keep my mission secret. And the world deserves your overwhelming beauty. He saw her blush under the fur with his words, and then she pulled out a handful of emergency snibble fluffs from the pockets of her uniform to stuff into her mouth to help contain her emotions. He groaned as he saw her cheeks stuffed full of sugary treats, shaking his head as he held her hand and looked away. Woof Wong? Your beauty makes me want to give up my task and run with you to the furthest reaches of space. But our very race requires me to complete this. Ooh, food dowing, she said, cheeks still full of food. Yes, I must go now before I lose the nerve to leave your side, but I shall return, and we shall run away together once I can reveal my true identity to you. Do not stray far, my love. I will return! He moved closed, clutching his hands in hers before they rubbed cheeks, and he scurried away. She swooned for a moment and gasped with delight at the thought of the mysterious stranger. Oh, if only she knew what his task was. A guard walked by, looking into the room and seeing the Gerweldian clasping her hands together, those fat cheeks bulging with food, his face contorting into what his people would consider a sneer. Why were those little fuzzballs so gross? I found a mummy see a swanger, she said to the guard, bits of food flying out of her mouth. The guard just clicked his claws in confusion and walked away. Pimford was moving quickly now, only uttering, "Sorry, pardon, please excuse me," to the guards he passed rather than flattening himself to the wall like before. He was feeling very aggressive. When he bumped into a guard, he only begged for forgiveness for a single minute before scurrying away. He wasn't sure what demon possessed him. Soon enough, he was in the Grand Matriarch's feasting room, and he nearly threw up at the sight of all the raw meat that had been laid out for her. Then he gasped as he saw her towering over the room, at one end of the long table of food that had been set up for her. Turning, the massive matriarch clicked and hissed, "Who are you?" "Chef!" "My food is already prepared, you idiot." "Need to add something to dessert." He was standing straight, eyes wide as he trembled slightly in her presence. She clicked in annoyance and wiggled a long, pointed leg at the far end of the table. "Desserts are down there." He stood still for a moment. "Go. Get to it. I'm about to eat." He squeaked and quickly scurried down the massive table. He reached into his pockets, pulling out the bag of pills as he found a tray full of white Perklean mush. He started to pull the package of pills from his coat and then fumbled it a bit, nearly dropping it as he heard some sort of blood-curdling screech. He clutched the package to his chest, looking down in horror as he assumed he'd been found. But instead, the matriarch was just leaning in and shoveling the food into her mouth. He gasped as he saw how quickly she was moving down the line and quickly tried to pull the jar open. But it had one of those damn pinch-and-twist locks. He struggled with it, looking on in horror as the matriarch ate tray after tray of food that had been left out for her. She was past the appetizers. He pounded the lid on the side of the table, jerking and twisting it as she got closer. When she was halfway through the main course, he finally got the top off, dumping the pills into the white mush and stirring it up with a spoon someone had left behind very quickly, just as she got close. Her bulk moving slowly on those many legs as he squealed and held the tray up for her when she got to him. You better not have messed this up." There were stains around her face, bits of things dripping from her mandibles. Clutching the tray, she tilted her head back, dumping it all into her mouth at once, letting the mandibles help guide it in. Then she tossed the tray, and he had to scurry away as she advanced a little further to finish consuming the rest of the food. Once it was all gone, he turned his head, shielding it as she let out a massive belch. Then she rumbled and shifted for a moment. That mush was good. Better than it usually is, at any rate. What's your name, chef? He was not prepared for this. Rimford. Westlathorpe the Fourth. That would throw her off his scent. Any relation to Gurgen Westlathorpe the Eighth? Yes, he was my great-uncle, I believe. He squeaked out then as she reached down, picking him up in her grabber claws instead of her cutting claws. What did I do? Nothing. But I want to see if the family trait was genetic. Whoa, what trait? She gave him a squeeze suddenly, and he squeaked out before she chittered and stomped her legs in amusement, giving him another squeeze to hear him squeak. The chittering intensified. I like you. You're my new head chef. Then she shuddered for a moment, and her mandibles stretched out as she indicated tiredness. I'm not feeling great. I think I'll take a nap. Could you let me go? But she was already tucking her legs in under her body, partially rolling to her side as he was left clutched in against her rumbling upper body. In her sleep, she lightly squeezed him, and as he squeaked out, she rumbled happily. He squirmed and struggled for a moment, but found himself held tightly in place. Grand matriarch A guard had stepped into her room and saw the matriarch slumbering with the Gerweldian in her claws. She ate everything and decided to take a nap. The guard clicked in annoyance. She's getting more senile every solar cycle. Turning, the guard walked out as Pimford squeaked again. Don't worry, I'll tell the other matriarch to fill in for her. Wait, she won't let me go. But the door had already closed. Pimford looked around for a moment and then sighed. Well, I guess I need to wait to be rescued by Mr. Billy Bob, savior of Gerweldians. Billy Bob and Emily were standing in front of the massive door leading to the summit meeting room as he looked up at it. So why did we lock it again? To keep them trapped in there. Wouldn't it make them curious when the security door's locked? Our agents inside told them it was just a precaution after some rumors. Well, how do we get in? She pointed to a side hall on his left. Through there. We'll unlock a smaller door and slip through. Once you kill the guards still inside, I'll start my speech. Then you go help Amelia. He nodded and shrugged. Sounds like a plan. This is amazingly easy so far. That's when he was slammed into hard from behind with a wave of energy. His shield flickered and failed, and part of the fake fur on the suit caught fire as he was knocked onto his face, cursing hard as inside the suit his head slammed against the display. Quickly, he rolled onto his back, seeing a crab with a matter slammer up on a balcony that he'd missed trying to reload. He pulled the ZF-1 up and fired at the same moment as the crab. The bullets tore through the guard, sending the shot wide, but as it hit one of the walls and sent out a shower of debris, the chunks pressed the red button on the side of the ZF-1. Billy Bob cursed louder still and tossed it as far as he could, pulling Emily down and shielding her as the pod exploded. Once it was over, he got up, checking to make sure Emily was all right as he remembered some of his fur was on fire, and then dropped back down, rolling around on the ground. Jesus Christ, this is the first time that was actually useful. What? What was useful? Having an exploding weapon? How is that useful? Emily cried out as she got up and dusted herself off. Billy Bob had put out the fire on his suit and stood up, still partially smoldering as bits of metal could be seen now. No, not that. That was unfortunate. But I finally used stop, drop, and roll. The way they taught it to us in school, I thought we were going to be on fire far more often in our life than we really were. Then again, it's an American school, so maybe they just play it safe. Seriously, Billy Bob, why did your weapon explode? Oh, some debris hit the self-destruct button. Why does your weapon even have that? So you can make it self-destruct. Is this some sort of trick question? He shrugged then before moving back over to his black bag. Okay, no more ZF-1. That's cool. I still got this, especially because I've been just dying figuratively to try this one. She stepped by him, walking down the security hall. I'll get the door ready. Hold on. Wait for me, he said, grabbed the bag and moving to follow her, stepping ahead as he brought out the axe. I haven't cleared this area yet. He glanced at her and clutched the axe in his hands as he stepped forward, but the hallway was empty. Never can be too careful, he muttered as she stepped up to the smaller security door. Okay, keep your axe handy. I'm not sure if there are any guards around the entrance here, she said as she opened the control panel next to the door. He nodded and stepped up to the door, ready for any trouble. She stood to the side, working on the control panel before it beeped and slid open. There was a crab behind it, turning to see what was going on, but instead found an axe buried in his skull. The crab collapsed, and Billy Bob stepped out further, noticing he was on the bottom row of a set of seats. Out in the center, he could hear talking and quickly pulled the final weapon free of his bag. There was supposed to be some fancy hamster even more important than the one from the Rosie that was here, and he would start to demand answers from the crabs about some sort of past crimes when he got the signal. From what Billy Bob could hear, that discussion had already started. It didn't sound like it was going well when he got to the main floor. The matriarch they'd sent to replace the ginormous one was out in the center, pointing her claws at a cowering hamster in a fancy suit and top hat. How dare you accuse us of this? Have all of you forgotten who saved the council in the regulation wars? You're all ingrates. She reared back, claws and legs moving to slam down on the hamster that was turning to run, when a massive thoom broke through the gasps of the diplomats and the matriarch's head disappeared in a mist, a large hole appearing the ceiling beyond her. The body collapsed lifelessly as ichor and mucus started to pour out. There were more screams and gasps as Billy Bob stepped into the light holding a Barrett 1-caliber rifle. On the side of the receiver was supposed to be printed anti-material rifle, but Billy Bob had scratched out material and written everything beneath it in red ink. Attention, diplomats! America has arrived! He broadcast on his suit speakers, and as the few remaining crabs in the summit room charged out, he killed 2 with a single shot that ruptured their upper bodies, and then dropped his rifle so he could cleave the axe through the last of them after catching 2 energy blasts to his right arm, which was now showing even more metal through the fraying fake fur. He looked around at the cowering diplomats and back at Emily. Anyone you're worried about? The Greslin. She pointed at the fish-cop counselor in the exosuit. I'm unarmed, the Greslin said quickly, raising his metallic arms. Billy Bob glanced back at Emily, who thought it over for a moment, and then looked up at Billy Bob. He's probably fine. I still have an energy blaster just in case. Get out there and help Amelia. She pulled out her pocket dimension, and he nodded, grabbing his rifle again as he headed toward the door. He was down to the shotgun, the rifle, and his axe, but that was more than enough for him. He probably wouldn't need to use the shotgun again until he ran out of 1-caliber ammo. Have fun blowing their minds. America's #1, he said, shouldering the rifle to raise a single finger from one. All right, Amelia, seal up the summit room. I'm on my way outside. Good, their reinforcements are here. We could use the help, Amelia said as he grinned inside the suit and broke into a jog, taking large, bounding leaps down the hall he'd fought through since the gravity here was so low. Soon he was back in the loading bay he'd decimated before. As he stepped through the open door, he looked around the compound. He could see smoke rising above several broken armored crabs and a hole in the perimeter wall. Much like the guards inside, he noticed these armored shells were much fancier looking than he'd seen so far. Didn't seem to help them from being turned to scrap, however. Amelia, in her power suit, was standing in a garden of burning flowers, crab corpses all around the clawed feet of the suit. Billy Bob glanced around and noticed a few of the other Libertonian commandos on the rooftops of the buildings surrounding the Capitol building. They would dive down onto the advancing crabs in the streets, fire off a few point-blank rounds, and then fly back into the air before the crabs could lock on. It wasn't a bad plan, but he couldn't fight like that. He looked up at the massive Capitol Tower above him. About 10 stories up, he noticed an exterior ring, some sort of massive balcony that circled the tower. Amelia, I need you to get me up there. He pointed up as she followed his finger. But you can't fly. Why do you think I need you to get me up there? I mean, how are you going to fight from up there? Don't you worry about that. Just help me get up there and I'll provide you cover. He approached the power suit as she leaned down, giving him an awkward hug as he gripped the power suit. Leaning back up, she then leaped into the air, the jets on the power suit boosting them into the sky before she landed on the balcony with a crunch. After dropping him off, she turned and jumped, aiming to land in the middle of another wave of advancing crabs. Billy Bob quickly surveyed the area as he had a commanding view of the city. 5 broad avenues split the city into districts for each of the founding species. The streets leading up from the fish cop and ass crab territory were the only ones that seemed to be busy leading troops, police, and ceremonial guards towards the Capitol building. Thankfully, they shared a border, so he only had to cover one angle of approach. He tossed the bag down, pulling out all the full magazines he had for the anti-everything rifle. 10 magazines with 10 rounds each, 7 in his current magazine and 1 in the chamber. This was the sort of word problem he wished he had back in school. With 108 bullets, how many Xenos can you kill? Depends on how good of a shot you are. He answered in his head with a grin. He crouched down behind the edge of the balcony wall, supporting his rifle as he took up the best position he could. Hey, Amelia, they need the signal clear to broadcast whatever Emily is saying inside. But did you guys also patch into the city PA? Yes. Why? Can I have access? Hold on. He waited as he began to examine the streets and buildings ahead of him through the scope of the rifle. He wished he had a spotter. Hell, he wished he had his older sister around. She was the best shot in the family. All right, your implant should have access now, Amelia said as he grinned. Quickly scrolling through his playlist, he selected a song with a grin. Aiming through his scope, he saw a crab on the main avenue waving other fish cops and his crabs forward. Looked important. Then he started the song up and pulled the trigger. Just as the first heavy bars of Stars and Stripes forever began to blare out of the city's PA system, the 1-caliber bullet struck the upper body of the crab, turning it into a mist. The round had dropped far less than he expected, which reminded him the gravity here was lower, so the bullet would drop less than usual. Either way, he was grinning as the soldiers began to huddle down, unsure what had just killed the officer. Christ, they've never dealt with a sniper, he muttered and took aim at an armored crab before pulling the trigger again. The buck of the rifle was strong even with his power suit, and he chuckled a little at the feeling of firing a weapon that would literally break his arms if he fired it without assistance. He shifted his aim and fired at another armored crab. He could hear his mother in his head scolding him for being so lazy and simply aiming for center mass. But he didn't have time to get fancy, or the skill if he was honest. Even so, center mass did just fine as the massive rounds slammed into his targets, killing them outright. Finally, they began to scramble for cover, slowing their advance considerably as they had no experience in dealing with snipers. He was sure their computer targeting eyepieces must be able to make this sort of shot, but it seemed they were all geared for close-range combat. Those matter slammers were the only things he'd seen used at any decent distance. They also weren't very familiar with ballistic weapons, as some of them were hiding behind trash cans and signs as if that would help. He couldn't help himself as Stars and Stripes Forever continued to assault their ears, or whatever the crabs called their hearing things. He began to time a few of the shots to the music, settling into his position as he fired round after round. The crabs and fish cops were now finally starting to split into the smaller side streets, moving slowly, even as he'd fire a round through a wall or corner of a building to hit a target. Compared to dense human construction, their buildings simply couldn't stand up to a high-powered sniper rifle round, especially ones the size he was using. This let the Libertonian commandos hop from roof to roof, firing down on the enemy. They weren't aiming, more just blindly firing, but their energy blasters had a lot of targets to hit, even if they weren't choosing their shots. Billy Bob had gone through about half his ammo before he discovered his mistake in playing loud music while not having anyone cover his back. He felt something slam into his side as his head slammed forward within the suit, making him glad for the pad that protected his face. He started to roll over just in time to feel something sharp pierce his right leg and along his ribs as he cried out. Some of the ceremonial guard was still in the tower, it seemed. He was looking up at a crab with one of those energy blasters standing over him with more behind. But Billy Bob was a high-gravity human in a power suit. He gripped the crab's leg that was piercing his leg, ripping it off as it chittered and staggered forward. Rising up, he grappled it and turned, tossing the Xeno off the side of the Capitol balcony. It screeched as it fell, and Billy Bob turned to the next crab it fired the energy blaster it held, hitting him square in the chest as he felt the heat flash through the power suit, and more of the fur got burnt away to reveal the metal beneath, making him look like some sort of Terminator Bork. Swinging out with his left to clobber the crab in the face, it staggered back into the crabs behind it as he quickly picked up his shotgun. He didn't need to aim at this range as he just held the trigger down, blowing the crabs away with a hail of buckshot, splintering and punching through the walls behind them as he hosed the room beyond as well with fire and lead. He panted for a moment as he stared at the wreckage and quickly reached into his bag, pulling out the last real weapon he had. The front of it read, "Face towards enemy." He armed the claymore and jammed it into the corpse of one of the crabs, facing the way they came from before examining his internal screen. Yes, wounds detected. How's this thing work? The space goblins had combined their tech with some human systems, and he noticed it was a human-engineered medical system inside. That was probably safe since everyone had slightly different anatomy and biology, but he figured it would just inject him with that Medi-Biogel stuff. So he got a surprise when he activated the system and heard the computer reply. Stapling. Stapling? The fuck does that mean? Then he screamed out as he felt metal staples clamp the hole in his leg shut and the cut along his side. Motherfucking asshole twat barbaristry isn't. Who designed this shit? My mother. Then the computerized voice spoke again. Applying morphine and battle stimulant. Wouldn't those just cancel out? He asked himself before he felt something jab his neck. He suddenly felt better. Not just better. He felt fucking fantastic. He shivered for a moment and then quickly crouched back down to grab his rifle. For some reason, he found it even easier to swing between targets, moving on before seeing if the bullet even hit the target. The music kept playing, but he wasn't paying attention to that now. Everything seemed far away, just him and the scope. He saw the Libertonians fighting still, slowly getting thinned out by the sheer weight of advancing enemy soldiers. They were the best the Libertonians had to offer, but they were horribly outnumbered, and Billy Bob only had so many bullets. He heard a voice from far away, something about a gunship, and pulled back from his scope, seeing a low-flying vehicle of some kind approaching over the city. Looking back through his scope, he got a bearing on it and saw a fish cop exosuit in the cockpit. For some reason, that was the moment he took to wonder if he should call them fish cops or fish soldiers. But then he pulled the trigger since he realized it was going to be fish dead. For once, his shot didn't connect as he saw some sort of shimmering field around the vehicle for a moment. The slow-moving craft began to angle away, but he quickly pulled the trigger 2 more times. The third shot apparently went through as he saw a bullet hole in the glass of the cockpit as smoke blocked out his view of what happened to the pilot. By the way, the ship veered sharply down into the main street, exploding and taking a few squads of soldiers with it. He figured he got the pilot. He saw another one of the flying vehicles in the back quickly turn to steer out of his line of sight. "Fall back! We've lost too many," he heard Amelia say as his hearing began to return. Looking down, he saw her power suit pull back through the gates of the main compound. Only 3 Libertonian commandos left now. "How much longer does Emily need?" he asked. "I don't know, but this a fight to the end, Billy Bob. Speech or not, do you think they're going to let us leave if they catch us?" He blinked and crouched back down over his rifle. Good point. There was another armored crab in his sights as he pulled the trigger. Something had changed, though. They were all starting to rush forward, crabs and fish. People he still wasn't sure what best to consider the non-cops of the fish cops. He saw a much bigger fish suit and quickly took that down as well, seeing the mech suit leaking water heavily as it collapsed. Shifting his aim, he sighted another walker. This one went down heavily on top of another exosuit. There! He saw a massive crab bitch slip past one of the side streets he didn't have a good angle on. That had to be spurring everyone forward. He fired again, smashing a hole in a wall near the queen crab to try and get a better shot, but then he heard an explosion. Leaning back from his scope, he saw another hole had been opened up in the wall to his left. Swinging the rifle around, he saw an armored crab and a large fish walker step through. He put the walker down first as he saw the action remain open. Cursing, he reached over to grab another magazine and then looked down to see he was out. Then he felt a rumble and a small explosion behind him and turned to see the remains of another crab squad who hadn't realized they were the enemy and they were approaching the front of a claymore. He needed to get down to ground level, but he wasn't done here. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out the last 2 drums for his shotgun, slung that over his shoulder with his axe, and then pulled the last item out of his bag, the American flag he had been given with the case. He tied it around the barrel of his rifle, pulling a crab corpse to the edge of the balcony to help prop the rifle up, letting the flag wave over the side. Then he leaned over to stare at the 10-story drop beneath him. Would that kill him in this gravity? He rubbed his chin as he thought it over and heard the rumble of engines. Looking to his side, he saw the other gunship had circled around and finally made it to the building. Without thinking, he began to sprint towards that side of the tower, leaping as he reached full speed to sail through the air and crash into the side of the cockpit. Inside, he could see the fish pilot freaking out in his exosuit, but Billy Bob didn't give him time to react. Instead, he just punched through the glass and yanked the pilot out, tossing him screaming out to fall to the ground. The vehicle whined as he ripped part of the cockpit off to straddle the remains and grip the stick, angling it down towards the opening that Walker had made. He saw more crabs and exosuits pouring through before they pointed up at him as he drove the gunship down towards them. They turned to run back into the breach, but it was a little too late for that. As the gunship approached the ground, he jumped off to the side, trying his best to tuck and roll, but more or less just clumsily flailing and then skidding across the ground as he bounced around inside, cursing and growling in pain. But he still had his axe and shotgun as he stood up. Just in time for the gunship to hit the breach and explode, sending him flying once more as what was left of the fake fur on the suit caught fire. He also gasped in pain as he felt something sharp dig through his lower back. As he rolled onto his side, he looked down to see a length of rebar, or the Xeno equivalent, had impaled him through the back and out the stomach. Groaning out, he dropped the shotgun and gripped the length of rebar. His display was warning about the rising heat since most of him was on fire still, but he had to ignore it as he yanked the rebar out, screaming as he did, and then once more as the suit stapled the wound shut. He could feel the heat around his legs grow ever hotter before his skin started to burn, and he finally started to roll around to put the fire out. He felt another jab in his neck and was too tired to curse, but the pain faded and his energy rose once more. Reaching out to grab his shotgun, he struggled to his feet and looked at the main gate. Amelia was standing near a statue as the two Libertonian commandos he could see crouched behind it. The armored crabs all seemed to be dead, but the regular ones were pouring through as he saw that fat queen crab. By now, his suit was just exposed metal, a few holes in it thanks to all he'd been through, and the 2 spare drums he'd grabbed were nowhere to be seen after his ride on the gunship, so he just charged forward, screaming as he fired what he had left. It was a good thing he didn't have to aim very well for it to be effective, since he could see his vision starting to blur a bit. The crabs turned, crying out as many were cut down, but the queen raised some of her claws to protect her face, even as the pellets slammed into her body, releasing some of the green gunk he always saw. When she lowered her claws, he hurled the empty shotgun at her, striking her in the head as she screeched and staggered back. This gave him the opening to pull his axe free and leap into the air at the queen crab. But she rose her claws in defense. He cut one free, only to be knocked to the ground by another. As he hit the ground, he rolled and rose back up so he could rush forward, swinging the axe to cleave off several of her legs. The crab queen screeched out once more. As her body collapsed to the side, he had a much better opening to chop at her head, cutting it clean off. He panted for a moment and looked around, seeing a lack of hostile crabs or fish, but a lot of burning garden and smoke. "Are we in the clear?" he asked, and then heard more chittering from the main gate. Looking forward, he saw 2 of the queen crabs, and one was holding some sort of metal tube. Without thinking, he pulled his arm back and threw the axe at that one, watching her cry out as the incredibly sharp axe head cut through a claw and sank into her chest. But the tube fired, and a massive explosion ruptured the ground in front of Billy Bob. He found himself flying through the air then, before the ground rushed up to meet him and everything went black. When he slowly opened his eyes, he was aware of being in pain and something beeping at him. His display was cracked and his right eye wouldn't open, detecting multiple bone fractures and breaks. Internal bleeding. Excessive blood loss. Concussion. Mild brain damage. 3rd-degree burns on 10% of body. Advise immediate medvac. No medvac possible, he groaned out. Advise last stand. Inject remaining battle stimulant. Warning, this could lead to long-term health problems. He laughed and then groaned as he pushed himself up a bit, grinding his teeth as he felt his arm scream at him in pain. He could see Amelia's power suit was face down, near the statue, the last remaining queen crab stabbing the one Libertonian's commando left alive with her forelegs as the Space Eagle screamed. "Last stand," he muttered and felt the needle jab his neck once more. He felt a bit more energy as he staggered to his feet and activated his speakers. "Hey, you ugly sack of shit!" The queen crab looked over at him, dropping the commando, who cried in pain as he hit the ground. "The human, you shall die slowly for what you've done. The trouble you've caused. My people you've killed. We will make you live for years before the sweet embrace of death. You're a stupid fucking asterisk, 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 cunt, asterisk, 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 asterisk. All your ass-faced kin are stupid fucking asterisk, 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 cunts, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Except I'm not even sure you're worth of being called a asterisk, 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 cunt, asterisk, 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 since they're more useful than you trash." She hissed in anger and skittered forward, grabbing him in her claws as she lifted him into the air. Battle stimulant or not, he couldn't fight the damn thing. She hissed in his face. "Your kin shall be slaves when this is over. You'll live to see them in chains. You'll watch us wipe your feathered friends out of existence." He could feel her claws cut through part of the metal on the sides of his suit as he got an idea. He pulled his arms out of the power suit arms, wiggling them down into the torso of the suit at his sides. "You're just delaying my death because you don't have the balls to kill me. You fear me and are trying to make me admit to being scared. Well, I'm not. You're just an ass-faced crab like the rest, only fatter and uglier and even stupider than the ones I've met so far. I'm looking forward to the day my people are eating what's left of you with some tartar sauce." She hissed out, and the claws sank deeper through the metal of the suit. He gasped in pain as he felt the claws cut his arms, but the legs dropped free of the suit since there wasn't enough metal to hold them in place, and he dropped out with them. The claws scraped up along the outsides of his arms, but as he hit the ground, she stared at the upper portion of the suit in surprise. Stepping back to get a better look at him, he was already grabbing the M1911S he'd kept inside the suit. Pulling them free, he pointed up, pulling the triggers as quickly as he could, watching her jerk back as 16.45 caliber round slammed into her upper body and head. As he ran out of bullets, she staggered back and then slumped to the side with a heavy thud. He lay on the ground then, feeling more tired than ever. He saw the remaining Libertonian commando crawling towards him. It was Jonas, but he seemed to be missing part of a wing and one of his arms. "I have Biogel," he croaked out. "Use it, man. I'm good," Billy Bob said as he looked up at the sky, keying into his implant communicator. "Emily, how's the speech?" "We did it! The member species are turning on the founders. I've exposed them. There's no way they'll join the war effort now." "That's great. Hey, I just want you to not read into this whole falling asleep on you thing. I swear it won't happen when it really matters." His eyelids felt heavy. "What are you talking about? What falling asleep on me thing? You don't mean like at the museum, do you? Billy Bob?" He blinked slowly as the wind began to blow the smoke out of his vision to let him see the sky. Then he saw the red, white, and blue flag fluttering in the wind, hanging from the barrel of his rifle where he left it. He rose his hand to his forehead, giving it a salute. "There's a present for you in a box on the Longhorn. I think you'll like it." "I'm sure I will when you give it to me. I'm on my way outside right now. Don't fall asleep." "You were a great dance partner, Emily." "Billy Bob! Billy Bob." He smiled as he saw the flag waving and closed his eyes. And so ends this saga in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. Billy Bob slowly walked forward through the fog, finding himself on the bank of a river as he approached a man sitting in a chair, casting a fishing line out into the water. He had gray hair and a big mustache, foregoing optical surgery for glasses. As Billy Bob walked through the bushes, the man looked over his shoulder and gave the chair next to him a pat. "The fish ain't biting for shit, but it's a nice spot, isn't it, kid?" "Hey, Grandpa." He took the seat next to his mom's father, picking up the fishing pole next to him and casting out into the river. He looked up at the sky and felt like they were in some nice, serene river valley up in the mountains, but couldn't really see anything he recognized. When he looked down, he noticed he was wearing white. "Oh, this is one of those stupid dream things, isn't it?" "Seems that way." "I should have known when I found you out here fishing instead of in a strip club." "Two happiest days of my life. Marrying your grandmother and putting her in the ground. She was a great woman, but after a few decades I was dying for some strange." "Gross." Billy Bob thought it over for a moment and then looked at his grandfather. "Wait, why aren't we in a strip club? I figured your wrinkly old ass would take every chance to be in one." Suddenly they were in a club with low lights in front of a stage as Billy Bob averted his gaze from the muscular man in a banana hammock performing in front of them. What the fuck? What? I thought you were into guys. I brought us to the Golden Banana. Damn it, Grandpa, how many times have I told you being on the dance team in school doesn't mean I'm gay? No harm if you are. What an adult does with another consenting adult is their choice. Not gay. His grandfather shrugged, and they were in the cockpit of his Longhorn instead. He looked around and smiled as he looked out into the dark of deep space. It was comforting. That's better. I didn't mean to go to a strip club, you know. I just meant you always seem to be in one. The hell I am. I'm a busy man for my age. I'm only in strip clubs 3 nights a week. Maybe 4. Nothing wrong with living it up at my age. The old man grinned and leaned back in his chair, popping open a beer as he took a sip. Speaking of, you're not dead, are you? You moved to Texas, too, to hunt lavafish. Last I heard, at any rate. Did a stripper give you a heart attack, you dirty old man? My ticker is strong as a bull's. Of course, if a gal did give me a heart attack, it wouldn't be from just looking, if you know what I mean. He grinned and chuckled as Billy Bob rolled his eyes. Gross again. So why am I talking to you and not Grandma? He kept his hands on the controls, watching the FTL lanes as he drove. He'd have to keep a steady pace if he wanted to make his 99. Why would you talk to her? All she'd do is scold you for being a degenerate who plays sissy sports. Baseball is not a sissy sport. You don't tackle anyone or nothing. Hardly anyone gets a concussion. Your mother was the best damn football players her high school ever had. She's got bigger balls than most men, including your no-good father. I never did approve of her marrying that fancy city boy. Too pretty for his own good. Billy Bob sighed and shook his head for a moment. I really wouldn't call him a city boy. He didn't know everyone in his hometown. Clearly he's a city boy. Okay, regardless, does all this mean I'm not dead? I mean, why am I talking to you if you're still alive? Well, maybe I'm an enlightened Buddhist monk astral projecting and shit? Billy Bob laughed out at that. Not a fucking chance. When I asked you what you thought about reincarnation that one time in past lives, you told me you must have been a fucking saint before to get born in America, and you wanted to live it up and sin your brains out. He heard his grandpa give that sort of old man part chuckle, part giggle. Those poor bastards don't drink or fuck or nothing. That ain't living. Well, then I am dead and you're dead. Or this is a dream. Shit, the suit mentioned brain damage. I could have told you that. No one with a right mind joins a dance team. I'll have you know I got all kinds of girls in high school thanks to my dancing. Sure. Stick a wig and some lipstick on them and they'll pass for a girl in the dark. This is why I never hung out with you. The old man shrugged and then held out a beer for Billy Bob, who popped it open and took a heavy sip while still keeping an eye on the FTL lanes. So am I supposed to learn something? My girl taught you everything I taught her, so hell if I know. Maybe this it to teach you to not get fucked up so much and learn how to fight properly. He took another sip of his beer and let out a belch. I know how to fight, Grandpa. Billy Bob sighed for a moment. That's not what your brother said. What? T-Rex? My brother who's built like a fucking tank. The same brother who is a Special Forces legend? The same brother who entered the bull riding competition in high school and was disqualified for punching his bull in the face after it tossed him off and knocking it out? That guy? That guy says I can't fight? Yeah. When you ask that guy if I can't fight, he's going to say no. He's my fucking brother on top of all that shit. Billy Bob snorted. I just wanted to fly things. Hey, the damn Space Force. I was sure you were gay when you became a pilot. They're not gay. He paused and thought back on his career with the Space Force and the volleyball courts in basic. Well, not all gay. He paused for a moment and then looked over at his grandfather. Wait, were you hoping I was gay? The old man shrugged. I figured your sister's a dyke, might as well have a gay grandson, too, to even it out. What about Cousin Davy? He's gay? How do you not know this? He married a man. I thought that was for the health insurance or something. Billy Bob sighed and shook his head, unsure if his grandfather was serious. Then he realized he wasn't sure if he thought his grandfather really didn't know or not in real life. This was confusing. But it did sound like something his grandpa wouldn't realize somehow. So, am I supposed to talk to you and then figure out if I want to live or die or crap? Fuck if I know. You're probably a vegetable in some hospital all brain dead and shit. God, I hope not. His grandpa shrugged and took another sip of his beer before pointing out the window. You're too close to that guy. Hey, who's the pilot here? I'm fine. The next system stop isn't for half a light year. He won't be getting off for a while if he even stops there. His grandfather shrugged. So if you aren't queer as a $3 bill, how come you don't got kids? 'Cause I'm a man of the FTL lanes. I like moving and traveling and shit. I don't want to settle down yet. I'm only in my 20s after all. Pretty late 20s, soon you'll be too old. Having kids in your 30s is not too old. Feh. Billy Bob shook his head and drank more of his beer as his grandpa finished his off and then got out of his seat to go back and get another one. Anyway, I don't think I'll be having kids. I like a girl, but she's a Xeno. Ooh, a Xeno lover. That makes sense. If it wasn't guys, it would be Xenos. Is it a she Xeno and not a he Xeno? Yes. She got nice tits? Jesus Christ, Grandpa. What? I can totally understand if she's got a big rack. Or like 3, or 4, hell, maybe even 6 big ones. Show me a Xeno with half a dozen big old bazongas, I might well suffocate to death. I need to hear exactly 0% of this, Billy Bob said as he slowly shook his head and rubbed his face in disbelief. The sort of disbelief when an older relative does something horrible, but for some reason you just can't call them out on it for reasons you don't quite understand, so you just can't believe it. How the hell you think you got here, kid? I fucked your grandmother. At some point, she shit out a bunch of kids, one of which was you, Mom. At this point, Billy Bob was loudly speaking gibberish to try and drown out his grandfather. She went against my wishes and fucked your dad, and obviously they boned quite a bit because you're the middle of 5. You do know old people still have sex, right? I swear to God, old man. If you don't stop right there, I'll toss you out the airlock. You can't tell me that when you were my age, you wanted to hear this shit from your grandfather. He glared at his grandpa for a moment, and the old man thought it over before shrugging. Yeah, probably right. They sat quietly for a while as Billy Bob drove through the space lanes before suddenly realizing something. Wait, why am I driving? This isn't real. I still don't know if I'm dead or alive or in a coma or what. He looked back over to his grandpa, then back out, still working as if driving mattered since he wasn't sure what was going on. What are we even doing here? Who knows? Probably just your last brain cells either dying or getting back to work. Let you talk things through with yourself. Learn things. I didn't learn shit. There you go. That's the spirit. So, you never did tell me if your Xeno gal's got nice tits. Stop. Fine. Gonna have kids with her? She's a Xeno. Well, have you tried? No, but we're different species. This isn't Star Trek where somehow everyone's a human with different paint and they can all apparently interbreed. I'll be lucky if I get out of sex with my hide intact. Ah, a real scratcher, eh? Sounds like my kind of girl. Either way, you should at least try having kids with her because the trying is the fun part. Having kids is really overrated, and if it doesn't work, just keep trying. Is that my takeaway from this? Sure. That and the fact that if you don't wake up, your mother is about to punch you in the face. He opened his eyes just as he saw a fist racing towards his face. He tried to move, but he didn't have a chance as he caught the blow with his red cheek, making his teeth click as the blow turned his head to the side. Ooh, fuck! He really wasn't aware of much else around him, but he could see white walls and people in scrubs and his mother standing over him. What's your name? What? He started to reach up and clutch his face, but the pain was receding faster than he expected. She grabbed his shoulders and began to shake him physically. What's your name? Jesus Christ, Mom. You know my name. It's Billy Bob Space Trucker. He was sitting up now, rubbing his face as he looked around the room. His mom was in her garrison uniform and obviously not her power suit, or she would have killed him with that punch. Even so, he was a little surprised how much the blow had initially hurt. There were a few doctors or nurses or whatever medical people around staring at him and her looking surprised. He was hooked up to some machines and had an IV of blue-purple stuff leading into his arm. He'd been dreaming about something. He couldn't remember what. The hell was that for Mom? These pussies told me you needed time and may never come out of your coma, and if you did, there was a chance you'd have brain damage and not remember your name. I told them that was crap and I'd prove it. So you punched me in the face? It worked, didn't it? He'd long ago learned it was better to not point out to his mother that some solutions didn't require hitting people. You did strike a superior officer, you know. He muttered as he tried to figure out how the rest of him was feeling. He was sore, pretty much everywhere, especially his face after that hit. Superior officer? La-di-fucking-da. You might outrank me, but you're not superior to Major Mary Sue. She gave him a whack upside his head for giving her lip, and he grumbled but was smart enough to keep those grumbles indistinct murmurs. One of the doctors, he assumed, stepped forward. So, do you feel all right? I feel sore. Do you remember how you got here? Do you mean in the philosophical sense, or the sense that I got fucked up in a fight in front of the Xeno Capitol Tower thing? Interesting. You seem to handle the biogel much better than the others. What? Isn't it supposed to work on everyone? He asked and glanced around. We're still trying to figure out how it works, but humans aren't entirely compatible without issue. Apparently it works best when you're very seriously injured. But if you only have minor wounds, it acts funny. Billy Bob snorted. Guess it's a good thing I keep having major wounds, huh? Yeah, they fucked you up good. That was from his mom, which made him roll his eyes. Thanks, Mom. If I had been there, you could bet your ass things would have gone better. Yes, Mom. I guess you're not as much of a complete fuck-up like I figured you were. He sighed for a moment. Glad I could lessen your disappointment. What? I was never disappointed. You know I love you and your brothers and sisters all. It's just you joined the Space Force and were a pilot, then a space trucker. I was worried you'd never live up to the family name. He laughed at that. Thanks, Mom. I guess it's true with a last name like... The door opened up as he saw Stevie Ray lean in. Sup, Booger Blaster? Hey, Snot Wrangler. That starts with a W, you know. We didn't know that as kids, so it still counts. What are you doing here? Where the hell are we anyway? He looked around as the doctors or nurses or whoever backed up to let his younger brother slip in and get closer to the bed. Gemini, his mom said. Shit, that's quite a ways from that capital world. How long was I out? Couple weeks, his brother said. What's going on with the war? How did I get here? The USS Predator was in system when you started the assault. They got to the capital shortly after your apparent last stand. Some bird commando used the last of his biogel to get you stable. Then that diplomat killed the few remaining ceremonial guards around the place. When the Archangels landed, they found only minimal resistance in the area, apparently. They seized the tower and got you and the birds out. Nice job with the flag, by the way. Apparently you crazy fucks had killed most of the crabs and fish in the Capitol crater thing. The Archangels got the now friendly Xenos to evac the crater and then destroyed the grav generator, so we actually still hold that crater. He nodded slowly as his mom told him what happened. Wait, still hold it? Shouldn't the war be over? She laughed at that and shook her head. Fuck no. Remember, the only races that had a real military were the crabs, the fish, and those lizard fly things. Fleckos, Billy Bob said as she shrugged. Well, the member races all pulled out of the alliance, but their military is still intact. The crabs retreated from Bastion, but there's still a war going on. The Fleckos, or whatever, are good at fighting the other races, and they can't fight us, so they're trying to start bullying those closest to them. This is a fight to the death. No one's surrendering. But now all their supply routes are in chaos, lots of contested territory. It's a giant mess, and it'll help us out to be sure. But things aren't going away overnight. What happened to the Libertonians? The ones who survived, you mean? They're alive. The one who patched you up got pretty messed up. They were dropped off on their home planet on the way here. The diplomat one wanted to stay with you, but her people wouldn't allow her to go. His mom shrugged. The ship I was on is now defunct. While waiting for reassignment, they were bringing you back in, so they gave me control of your Longhorn, Stevie Ray said. Oh, what the fuck? Don't they know you're a horrible pilot? Bite me, dickbag. Come here and I will. He opened his mouth and leaned towards his brother, who laughed and just shoved him back against his raised bed. Shit, you're lucky I'm so weak right now. He did feel rather tired, but that was preferable to being dead, so he didn't complain. Who else is here? It's just us, Stevie Ray said. Mom complained about being pulled off the line, but they told her she'd get 2 weeks before they started advancing again anyway. I'm pretty happy with my new posting. Teddy is off killing Xenos wherever. Mary Jane is supposedly leading some ghost squad on a planet where she's using trained crabs as mounts. What the fuck? Yeah, but that's MJ and you know it. Billy Bob nodded after thinking about it for a moment. Jackie, Jill, and Dad are still on Bastion helping rebuild until the front starts moving again. So what's the plan? You heal up and we send you back to Earth so President Crusher can pin a medal on you. That's President Cross Stevie Ray, his mother corrected. Billy Bob was shaking his head. No, I gotta go see the Libertonians. He swung his feet off the bed and started to stand, only to nearly collapse as Stevie Ray had to catch him. Christ, Billy Bob, there's a reason you're hooked up to all this shit. You've spent a couple weeks comatose, muscle atrophy and all that. Billy Bob panted a bit, feeling sweaty and tired just from his ill-fated attempt to stand up. Okay, get me a wheelchair then. The doctors were approaching once more. That's not advised at all. We'd like to monitor you for another week, not to mention you need this new biogel dispenser hooked up to keep you healing properly. I can't stress how close to dying you've been this whole time. Stevie Ray, can you hook one of those things up to the Longhorn? I guess? Well, as a colonel, I order you to get to it. He pointed at his mom. Major, I order you to get me a wheelchair, and if anyone tries to stop us, you clock 'em good. His mother laughed. There we go. Now you're living up to the name. The doctors began to panic as Billy Bob and clan staged a breakout of the hospital. No one was sure what to do in trying to stop a highly decorated Special Forces major, and her son, who was a colonel, and soon to be also highly decorated one at that. So soon enough, Stevie Ray was wheeling Billy Bob into the back of his Longhorn while their mom kept the soldiers at bay with a large wrench. "Stomper!" Billy Bob cried with a smile as the multi-legged fox ran up to him once Stevie Ray brought him on board. The creature lived up to his name, stomping around the wheelchair as Billy Bob rubbed his head, turning to wave to his mother as he saw her out the back hatch when it started to close as Stevie Ray got them in the air. They ignored demands from the brass to return to the hospital, and Stevie Ray had hooked up the dispenser in the main cabin for Billy Bob, so they were all set. Mittens provided him plenty of company as he sat around healing up. The FTL lanes around human space had been reactivated since the remaining Council forces had all pulled back to their own territory, but it was still slow going with the war on. Took them 5 days to get from Gemini to the Libertonian homeworld. They were still skirmishing with the crabs in the space between their planets in the system, but neither side had moved much. Once he announced their presence to the Libertonians, they were brought in with an escort as Billy Bob got to see the Libertonian homeworld. Well, the real thing. He'd seen that painting he helped Emily steal. Lots of mountains over gorgeous-looking river valleys, but he wasn't sure what the gas in the bottoms of the valleys were. They seemed to like building cities up on top of the mountains, and he saw plenty of them flying around as they landed near a big city he figured was their capital. He wondered how long it would take for him to get a hold of Emily. She was probably stuck in some sort of boring meeting or debrief or something. He walked to the airlock of the Longhorn, moving around slowly but surely since he'd had a few days of steady biogel and Earth-standard gravity to get his muscles working again. Then, as he opened the hatch, Emily was right in front of him. Blah. She jumped up with a big smile. Billy Bob! But as she crossed the threshold, she was hit with the heavier gravity and dropped heavily against him, knocking him back as he hit the floor of the cabin with a heavy thud, feeling a crack as pain spiked through his skull. He whimpered as she looked down at him. Oh no, not again! Stevie Ray was moving back and quickly lowered the gravity for her as she got up off Billy Bob. Jesus, lady. He helped Billy Bob up, sitting him down on the chair they'd set up next to the biogel dispenser, quickly sticking the tube back into his arm. You'd think the two of you were an item the way you jumped on the guy. Stevie Ray laughed at that and then looked at Emily, who was glancing away, and then over at Billy Bob, who was smiling. So that's why you rushed to get here. Ah, well, I'll go see what's around here then. He passed Emily and closed the airlock behind him. Emily looked at Billy Bob and then laughed. I can't stop hurting you, can I? Doesn't seem that way. He rubbed the back of his head gingerly, feeling better as the biogel was released into his body. I'm just so happy to see you. I can't tell you how worried I was back on the Capitol when I found you outside. She climbed up onto his lap as he blinked up at her, a little surprised, but in no position to stop her. She was wearing a black vest, that usual tuft of feathers covering up the area he still expected to find cleavage. The survival suit was gone, but she was wearing those special gloves, thankfully, and her lower body was clad in black pants that still reminded him of bell-bottoms. Had to make room for those talons, he guessed. She rubbed her two upper hands along his face, her lower hands against his chest as he arched a brow. "You seem frisky." "I am. And it seems to me that you're currently hooked up to a machine that pumps you full of biogel as needed. Isn't that the case?" He looked up over his head at the dispenser and then back at her. "Yes, that's true." "Well, you were worried about what might happen, and now in case anything goes wrong, you're already set." He blinked and slowly arched a brow. She shifted on his lap a bit, hands moving to open his shirt already. "Shouldn't we be worried about my brother?" "You saw him. He's giving us our space. Who else knows you're here?" He thought it over for a moment and then slowly shrugged. "I guess this is probably the best time for it." She laughed at that and nodded. "Plus, I've really missed you." He laughed at that, hands moving up to rub along her sides. "Well, shit, I guess since I'm already healing, this couldn't possibly make things worse." She giggled at that and leaned in to give his neck a nip as he gasped, the biogel starting to pump a little faster. About 5 minutes later, neither one of them was expecting the airlock to open up as they heard Stevie Ray. "Hey, the bird president and this space hamster president wanted to thank you guys for—" He stopped as he stepped out of the airlock into the main cabin and looked at Billy Bob and Emily, who were both staring back in a mixture of surprise and horror. Stepping around Stevie Ray was a Libertonian in a very nice-looking suit who also froze, and squeezing between them was a space hamster in a tuxedo complete with top hat, cane, and monocle. "I say, we weren't properly introduced before. I'm so glad to meet you. I used to be the Gerweldian counselor." He walked up to Emile and Billy Bob. They were in the same position as before, with her on his lap on the chair, but their clothes were elsewhere. Emily looked to Billy Bob, who reached out and shook the offered hand of the hamster without saying anything. Then Emily did the same. The hamster glanced around at the clothes on the floor. "I say, were you two in the midst of laundry?" Stevie Ray stepped forward, picking the hamster up as he squeaked in surprise. "What's going on?" "Sorry, Mr. Prime Hamster. They're just... it's... stuff." He backed out of the airlock, carrying the hamster as the Libertonian president stayed for another moment and gave a thumbs up and nodded after he looked them over before following suit, locking the airlock behind him. After another moment, Billy Bob and Emily began to laugh. They were left alone after that. "So, what's all this again?" Emily was asking as Billy Bob finished cooking in the cabin's small kitchen. "Biscuits and gravy, chicken fried steak, and eggs." He smiled and slid a large plate in front of her. "Dig in." The next day, they had to spend actually interacting with the others on the planet. Billy Bob met several officials and the president again. He had to put up with having his picture taken quite a bit and needed his wheelchair again by the end of the day, but Emily had always been with him, which made it easier to deal with. In the end, he knew he couldn't stay. The brass were demanding he return already, and she still couldn't get permission to leave since she was also needed to the war effort. They stood outside his Longhorn with a crate between them. "I didn't get a chance to find it after your commandos got us off the planet. So this is the gift you got me, huh?" He nodded at that. "Bought it with some of my 10 billion credits." He grinned and she stared at him for a moment. "Billy Bob." "Yeah, I know. As a colonel in the U.S. military, I can't take large gifts from foreign governments. I'm well aware. Once the war started, I realized that would happen. It might have been about the money once, but not anymore." He shrugged, then he opened the box. She frowned as she pulled out what was inside. It was some sort of strange box and harness connected to a set of headphones with some extra straps on it. "What is it?" "I found it in a curio shop on that goblin station. They're fascinated with music from my home world a ways back. They only had vinyl records back then, so someone made a portable record player with a harness that fits a Libertonian. Same with the headphones. That way you can fly and listen to music." She let out a surprised squawk and then laughed, starting to pull the harness on to see how it worked. In the end, she still had full motion of her wings and arms, and the box was settled against her chest. He smiled and then leaned up as she leaned down, nuzzling his cheek with her beak. "I love it, Billy Bob. Thank you." he smiled. I loaded a record in there that starts with the greatest song I could possibly think of. Feel free to start listening to it. Me and Stevie Ray gotta go, but I'll be back. We'll meet up again soon. Somewhere. Somehow. They held hands for a little longer, her lower set rubbing his sides. Once more they leaned in to rub cheek to beak before pulling away. She started the record once he had boarded the Longhorn. The music began to play, and she stood on the landing pad, letting the music pour out of the custom headphones. It took about a minute before the singing finally began. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? For I must be traveling on now, 'cause there's too many places I've got to see. She felt tears start to well up in her eyes. But if I stayed here with you, girl, things just couldn't be the same. 'Cause I'm as free as a bird now, and this bird you cannot change. Oh, 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 oh. And this bird you cannot change. And this bird you cannot change. Lord knows I can't change. The singing stopped for a minute, and the Longhorn took off, moving up slowly. She quickly ran to the edge of the platform, leaping off as she took flight, working hard to keep up with the ship as she saw Billy Bob in the co-pilot seat where she used to sit. He looked over at her and smiled, waving as she listened to the lyrics start again. Bye-bye, baby, it's been a sweet love, yeah. Though this feeling I can't change, but please don't take it so badly, 'cause Lord knows I'm to blame. She was flapping her wings harder to keep up now, the tears streaming out of her eyes as she smiled, flying as fast as she could. But if I stayed here with you, girl, things just couldn't be the same, 'cause I'm as free as a bird now. And this bird you cannot change, oh, 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 oh. And this bird you cannot change. And this bird you cannot change. Lord knows I can't change. Lord help me, I can't change. The tempo of the song began to build up as she flew, and Billy Bob looked over to Stevie Ray saying something as the Longhorn began to dip and dive, letting Emily swoop down, twisting and spinning alongside as she flew. Lord, I can't change. Won't you fly high, free bird, yeah? The ship began to pull up, and she shifted to climb with it as she listened to the music, wings beating harder and harder as she flew almost straight up to try and stay even with the Longhorn. She could see Billy Bob laughing and smiling and crying as much as she was at this point. The music kept playing, and she kept up as they rose higher and higher, the sky growing darker and darker as her breath started to come out in puffs. She'd never dared fly this high before. Finally, she couldn't rise any higher, gasping out as she had to angle down, starting to glide and level out, as she turned to fly, back down face up to watch the Longhorn keep going up into the sky as the song reached a fever pitch before finally breaking. As she began to glide back down towards her home, she saw the Longhorn get smaller and smaller until she couldn't see it anymore, and the song didn't really end. It just faded away.